They will break every single bone in your body. Bitch. Karlissa reacts to Chris and Rock signing her boxing deal. Karlissa.
Nobody saw this coming. Not the boxing world, not the internet, and definitely not Karlissa. 1 minute Chrisean Rock is trending for chaos as usual. And the next minute she signs a boxing deal like she just woke up and decided to speedrun a Rocky movie without the training montage. And that's when Karlissa dropped a line so cold it froze timelines. They'll break every bone. Not maybe, not allegedly. Every bone. That wasn't advice. That was a warning wrapped in dread, dipped in fear, and delivered like a leaked voicemail nobody was supposed to hear. Suddenly, this wasn't about boxing anymore. This was about survival. This was about whether Chrisean just walked into the most dangerous chapter of her life thinking it was a comeback story. The internet reacted like someone set off fireworks in a gas station. Some people laughed. Some people panicked. Some people replayed the clip 10 times like there was a hidden message buried inside it. Because when someone as outspoken as Karlissa stops joking and starts sounding genuinely alarmed, you don't scroll past that. You lean in, you lower your volume, and you ask the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Does Chrisean know something we don't? Or did she just sign up for a fight that's bigger than fists, contracts, and hype? Because this warning didn't sound dramatic. It sounded final. Chrisean Rock signing a boxing deal should have been framed as a victory lap, a redemption arc. A new chapter moment with inspirational music playing in the background. That's how these things usually go when celebrities jump into combat sports. But this one detonated differently because before the applause could even warm up, Karlissa dropped a warning so sharp it cut straight through the hype. They'll break every bone. Not a joke. Not a metaphor. Not a dramatic exaggeration. Meant for clicks, it landed like a cold sentence handed down in advance. And suddenly this deal stopped looking like a glow-up and started looking like a countdown. To understand why this hits so hard, you have to understand Chrisean's history. She doesn't enter rooms quietly. She crashes through them with chaos, emotion, and viral aftermath trailing behind her like smoke. Every chapter of her public life has been loud, unpredictable, and emotionally charged. That energy might fuel reality TV, but boxing is not a space that rewards impulse. It punishes it ruthlessly. And that's why Karlissa's reaction mattered more than any press release or training photo ever could. The deal itself appeared out of nowhere. No long public buildup. No years of documented amateur fights. Just a sudden announcement that Chrisean was stepping into a professional combat world that eats newcomers alive when preparation doesn't match confidence. Fans were stunned, but the industry wasn't shocked. Celebrity boxing has become a cash machine, and promoters don't ask deep questions when a name can sell tickets. They ask one thing only: will people watch? With Chrisean, the answer is always yes. That's where the unease began, because attention doesn't equal readiness, and notoriety doesn't protect your body once the bell rings. Karlissa seemed to understand that immediately. Her warning wasn't wrapped in jealousy or shade. It was delivered with a seriousness that stripped the moment of celebration. It sounded like someone who's seen enough chaos to recognize when another disaster is lining up quietly in the background. The internet, of course, reacted instantly. Some laughed it off, calling Karlissa dramatic, negative, or bitter. Others froze on that sentence alone. They'll break every bone. People replayed it, slowed it down, analyzed her tone like it was a leaked interrogation tape. Because when someone known for bluntness suddenly sounds genuinely afraid, it changes how the message lands. This wasn't entertainment fear. This was protective fear. Behind the scenes, speculation exploded. Was Karlissa hinting at mismatched opponents? Was she implying Chrisean was being rushed into something she wasn't trained for? Or was she pointing at the darker side of boxing contracts, where fighters with buzz get thrown into high-risk situations because their loss still generates profit? Nobody knew for sure. But everyone felt the weight of the question, and that uncertainty made the deal feel less like an opportunity and more like a gamble with loaded dice. Chrisean's response, or lack of one, only added fuel to the fire. She didn't publicly reassure anyone. She didn't dismiss the warning. She didn't clap back. She kept posting training clips, smiling like the storm wasn't gathering around her. To some, that looked like confidence. To others, it looked like denial. Silence can mean strength, but it can also mean you're locked into something you can't escape without looking weak. As the news spread, fans began connecting dots that hadn't seemed important before. Old injuries resurfaced. In conversations, past fights outside the ring were dissected and compared to professional boxing, as if chaos and technique were interchangeable. They're not. Boxing is about discipline, timing, endurance, and restraint, the very qualities Chrisean's public image has never been associated with. That disconnect made Karlissa's warning feel less like pessimism and more like realism. Promoters leaned into the spectacle because that's what they do. Words like war, destruction, and violence floated through captions like bait. Instead of calming fears, it amplified them, because when the marketing focuses on damage rather than skill, it raises the question of who exactly is expected to absorb that damage. And when someone close to the fighter is openly worried, the optics become uncomfortable fast. Karlissa didn't clarify, she didn't walk it back. She let the warning stand on its own, raw and unresolved. That choice mattered, because if her words were exaggerated, she had every opportunity to soften them, but she didn't. She left them hanging in the air like a storm cloud nobody wanted to acknowledge. That restraint suggested conviction, not clout. By this point, the narrative had shifted. This wasn't just about whether Chrisean could win a fight. It was about whether she was being protected or positioned. Whether the people around her were prioritizing her safety or her sellability. And whether the audience was cheering for growth or subconsciously waiting for another crash to react to. Karlissa's warning became the lens through which everything was viewed. Every training photo looked less inspirational and more ominous. Every smile looked forced to some, fearless to others. The deal itself hadn't changed, but the meaning of it had. It stopped being a surprise announcement and became a potential turning point that could redefine Chrisean's entire public narrative. This was the moment where celebration and concern collided head-on, where excitement met dread, and where one sentence shifted the entire trajectory of the story. Because when someone says they'll break every bone, they're not predicting a loss. They're predicting a cost, and costs in boxing are paid in ways that don't heal easily, no matter how viral the moment becomes. And that's where this chapter truly begins, not with gloves, or contracts, or cameras, but with the warning that refused to be ignored, and a decision that now carries weight. Far heavier than hype. Once Karlissa's warning escaped the comment section and hit the algorithm, the story stopped being controllable. It didn't trend politely, it erupted. One sentence turned into 1,000 interpretations, and suddenly Chrisean's boxing deal wasn't a sports headline anymore. It was a cultural moment wrapped in anxiety, sarcasm, memes, and genuine concern, all colliding at once like a group chat that got out of hand and never calmed down. The internet did what it always does best. It split into sides within minutes. One side treated Karlissa like the villain of the week, accusing her of trying to sabotage Chrisean's moment. They called her negative, bitter, dramatic, and attention-hungry. The other side treated her like the only person brave enough to say what everyone else was thinking. And the louder the argument got, the more her warning echoed through every conversation. Whether people wanted to admit it or not, memes started circulating faster than facts. Photoshopped images of boxing gloves wrapped in bubble wrap, jokes about orthopedic surgeons getting front row seats, dark humor flooded timelines because humor is how the internet masks discomfort. People laughed, but the laughter felt uneasy. This wasn't playful trolling. It was nervous comedy, the kind that shows up when a situation feels risky but nobody knows how to stop it. Celebrity reactions added another layer of chaos. Nobody said Karlissa was right or wrong directly. Instead, they posted big messages about knowing your limits or choosing the right team. That's influencer code for something's off, but I don't want to be quoted. A few hyped Chrisean's courage, praising her for stepping into something fearless, but even those posts felt cautious. Like compliments written with an escape. Rude. The comparisons came next, and they were ruthless. People lined up past celebrity boxing attempts like cautionary tales, not the successful ones that get replayed in promos, but the forgotten disasters. The fights that ended with injuries, lawsuits, or careers quietly fading away. Suddenly, Chrisean's deal didn't look groundbreaking. It looked like another entry in a long list of experiments where the audience wins and the fighter pays. Karlissa, meanwhile, stayed silent, and that silence became its own statement. In internet culture, silence is rarely accidental. If she wanted to walk it back, she could have. If she wanted to clarify, she could have, but she didn't. She didn't. She let the chaos swirl without interference, like someone confident that time would prove her point without needing commentary. That restraint made her warning feel heavier with every passing hour. Fans began scrutinizing Chrisean's training, footage with unsettling intensity, arm placement, footwork, stamina. People who had never wrapped their hands suddenly became experts overnight. And while some comments were supportive, many were laced with concern. The consensus forming quietly beneath the noise was simple: this looks rushed, and rushed is dangerous. The tone of the conversation shifted from excitement to apprehension. At first, people were asking if Chrisean could win. Now they were asking if she should even be there. That's a subtle but massive change. Winning is about ego. Belonging is about safety. And when the question becomes about whether someone belongs in a ring, it means doubt has already dug its claws into the narrative. Promoters didn't help. They leaned harder into the spectacle. Because controversy sells better than reassurance. Teasers focused on aggression, dominance, and destruction. The messaging didn't say this is a technical contest. It said this is a collision. And collisions don't care who's prepared. They just care who absorbs the impact better. That's when Karlissa's words started sounding less like exaggeration and more like foreshadowing. They'll break every bone began popping up everywhere. Quoted, remixed, mocked, feared. It became shorthand for everything people were worried about but didn't know how to articulate. Physical risk, emotional pressure, exploitation disguised as opportunity. Public outrage simmered under the jokes. Some fans accused the boxing industry of capitalizing on Chrisean's instability. Others accused the audience itself of turning trauma into entertainment. The conversation got uncomfortable fast because it forced people to confront their role in the spectacle. It's easy to cheer until someone gets hurt. Then everyone suddenly claims they were concerned all along. Chrisean's image took a hit in a way that wasn't obvious at first. She was still trending, still visible, still booked, but the tone changed. She was no longer framed as fearless. She was framed as vulnerable. That shift matters. Vulnerability invites sympathy. But it also invites predators, and in a business as unforgiving as boxing, perception can shape outcomes before the first punch is thrown. The most unsettling part was how normalized the risk became. Comments like "she'll be fine" appeared everywhere, even though nobody could explain why they believed that. Optimism replaced evidence, hope replaced preparation. And Karlissa's warning loomed over it all like a reality check nobody wanted to process. This chapter wasn't about punches or contracts. It was about momentum, and the momentum was no longer controlled by Chrisean or her team. It belonged to the internet, the promoters, and the narrative machine that feeds on tension. Karlissa's warning cracked the surface, and everything underneath spilled out. By the end of this phase, the story had evolved into something darker and more complex. The deal was signed, but the cost was already being debated. Trust was thinning. Confidence was being questioned, and the audience, whether they admitted it or not, had started watching with a mix of excitement and dread. This wasn't just a fight being promoted anymore. It was a test of whether chaos could be rebranded as courage without consequences, and the answer, whatever it ends up being, was already starting to form in the uneasy silence between the memes. By the time the dust settled from the memes, the hot takes, and the endless back and forth, something strange had happened. The fight hadn't even happened yet, but the aftermath had already begun. That's the part nobody plans for. The consequences that arrive early, quietly, and without permission. Chrisean Rock was still training, still posting, still smiling through it all. But the energy around her had changed in a way you couldn't unsee once you noticed it. Her public image started splitting into two versions. One version was fearless, unstoppable, ready to conquer yet another lane. The other version looked exposed, overextended, and dangerously close to being used as entertainment instead of being protected as a person. That split mattered because boxing doesn't care about brand narratives. It only cares about what happens when the bell rings. And the closer that moment got, the louder Karlissa's warning echoed in hindsight. Relationships around Chrisean began to feel strained, even when nobody said it outright. Support became louder but thinner, like people were cheering to convince themselves rather than to reassure her. The kind of encouragement that sounds positive but feels hollow if you listen closely. You could tell some people didn't want to be on record questioning the move, because nobody wants to be blamed later for not believing. Silence became self-preservation. Karlissa, meanwhile, found herself recast in the public eye. Some fans painted her as toxic, claiming she was manifesting negativity. Others saw her as the only person willing to risk backlash to speak uncomfortable truth. And that's a dangerous place to stand, because history judges warnings retroactively. If Chrisean walks away unscathed, Karlissa becomes dramatic. If Chrisean gets hurt, Karlissa becomes the one who tried to stop it. Either way, she loses something. The boxing deal itself started looking different under this new light. Less like a dream opportunity and more like a pressure cooker. The marketing ramped up, but reassurance never followed. Nobody stepped forward to clearly explain safeguards, preparation, or long-term plans. The absence of that conversation was louder than any promo clip. It suggested a focus on spectacle over sustainability. And that's never a comforting sign in a sport built on damage. Public perception grew volatile. Fans who once hyped every move began hedging their praise. Comments shifted from "she's about to dominate" to "I hope she's okay." That change is subtle, but it's massive. Hope is not confidence. Hope is what people cling to when certainty is gone. And once an audience starts hoping instead of believing, the tone of support changes permanently. The scariest part was how quickly risk became normalized. People repeated phrases like "she's built for this" or "she's tough," as if toughness cancels physics, as if grit reinforces bones. Boxing doesn't negotiate with toughness, it tests it until something gives. Karlissa's warning wasn't about whether Chrisean could take a punch. It was about whether she should have to. Chrisean herself became quieter in ways that didn't show up on timelines. Her posts still existed, but the bravado felt thinner. The smiles looked rehearsed. That could be focus, or it could be pressure. Either way, it signaled a shift from excitement to obligation. When something stops feeling optional and starts feeling inevitable, that's when the weight truly sets in. And then there's the larger picture nobody wants to confront. The culture that cheers the loudest when chaos enters new arenas. The way fame creates a false sense of invincibility. The idea that because someone survived one kind of damage, they're immune to another. Boxing history is littered with people who believe that lie. Their names trend briefly, then fade quietly once the cost is paid. Karlissa's words continued circulating, not because she repeated them, but because reality kept giving them due context. Every aggressive promo, every careless joke, every clip that framed violence as entertainment instead of consequence, the warning aged in real time, becoming less shocking and more obvious with each passing day. This moment began to redefine Chrisean's narrative before the fight even happened. No longer just a controversial figure jumping into boxing, she became a symbol of how the industry, the internet, and fame itself intersect. A test case for whether concern can coexist with entertainment, or whether one always gets sacrificed for the other. The unanswered questions lingered heavily. If something goes wrong, who takes responsibility? The promoters who cashed in, the fans who tuned in, the critics who stayed silent, or the people who warned her and were ignored? Boxing doesn't answer those questions. It just moves on. That's what makes this chapter so unsettling. There's no clear villain, no obvious hero, just a decision made under bright lights, a warning delivered without a safety net, and a crowd watching with conflicted eyes, excited, nervous, curious, uneasy. Chrisean. Rock hasn't stepped into the ring yet, but the fight around her has already taken its toll. On trust, on perception, on the line between courage and exploitation. And Karlissa's warning sits at the center of it all, no longer sounding dramatic, but disturbingly plausible. This isn't the end of the story. It's the moment before. Impact, when everything feels suspended in midair. The outcome will decide how this chapter is remembered. As a bold leap that paid off, or as a preventable collision everyone saw coming but chose to watch anyway. Because in the world of celebrity boxing, the punches don't just land in the ring. They ripple outward, and sometimes the damage shows up long before the gloves ever touch. Now, before you click away, let's be honest with each other for a second. This story isn't comfortable. And it's not supposed to be. If Karlissa's warning made you pause even for half a heartbeat, then congratulations, you're actually paying attention. So I need you in the comments right now. Was Karlissa overreacting? Or was she the only one brave enough to say what everyone else was too scared to admit? Do you see this boxing deal as Chrisean's redemption arc? Or does it feel like a high risk gamble dressed up as opportunity? Pick a side and stand on it.